You can't predict the future, but you can prepare for it. Arizona State University is building degrees for what's ahead, taught by world-class faculty who are shaping our future. Explore over 350 programs offered online at asuonline.asu.edu.
Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to Stars of the Golden Age, a show that highlights the lives of legends from film, music, and the birth of television during Hollywood's Golden Age, with a special emphasis on their lives behind the scenes. I am your host, Erin Carlson. Hey everyone, I feel like I haven't talked to you in ages. Well, here I am. But before we begin, I never thought I'd have to say this, but I would like to assure everyone listening right now that I am a human. And absolutely nothing about creating the show is AI. Nothing. I have received a few comments lately about how the show is AI, and I assure you it is as far from AI generated as can be. I am an old-fashioned girl reading old-fashioned books and typing my stories on an old-fashioned laptop before sitting in an old-fashioned chair to speak with my authentic old-fashioned voice, and then giving many old-fashioned hours of work to edit my old-fashioned recording. I am real, my research is real, and the many, many hours of work I put into producing this podcast all by myself are very real. And being accused of anything otherwise feels like a giant slap in the face, especially when the word slop is attached to the accusation. We independent podcast creators are working really, really hard to create quality content with our own brains and our very valuable time. So please be respectful of that. I know most of you are. Now that we have that out of the way, for now, I am so pleased to tell you that today we will be talking about the one and only Greta Garbo. And not only is it this show's 2nd anniversary, but this very episode is the 100th episode of Stars of the Golden Age. 2 years, 100 episodes. I am so happy to have you all along for the ride, and thank you so much for sticking around and hearing what I have to share. It hasn't been easy lately, I'll be honest with you, for a few reasons, but one big one is the unflattering reviews like I just mentioned. But I am trying to keep my focus on the positive and the joy taking these journeys provides for me, and the beautiful connections I've been able to make in the process. So, thanks to you all, and here's to 100 more. I am excited to share with you a brand new book about the life of Greta Garbo. This book stands out because it was written by Greta Garbo's own great-nephew, Scott Reisfield. He put an incredible amount of time, energy, and research into creating a new, comprehensive, and very detailed account of Greta Garbo's life story. I will do my best to share with you here what I learned from Scott Reisfield, but I highly encourage you to grab his book so you can read every little detail he has to offer. You can find the links in the show notes. And he has a real old-fashioned brain too, as far as I know, so please support him. I also used the book Greta Garbo, A Life Apart by Karen Swenson, and while researching the life of Greta Garbo for you. So a huge thank you to both of these incredible biographers for all of their hard work. I do want to point out that there were some details between the two that varied a bit, but the meat of the story is aligned. Scott Reisfield had the great advantage of having family records and recollections, and his research within the book is very comprehensive. Scott's book has just been released, but until now, the gold standard for Greta Garbo biographies has been Karen Swenson's biography, the other book I'm using for my research. So my information for you is coming from the two very best out there that are keeping the story of Greta Garbo alive. Since I have so much to share with you, this will be a multi-part story, hopefully just 2 episodes. Today, the early life and early career of the great Greta Garbo. The woman we know as Greta Garbo was born as Greta Lovisa Gustafsson on September 18, 1905, in Stockholm, Sweden, to parents Carl and Anna Gustafsson. She was the third and final child for Carl and Anna, who already had 7-year-old Sven and 2-year-old Alva. The growing family resided in a 3rd-floor apartment in Stockholm with a private kitchen, running water, but no toilet, which was more so due to a citywide moratorium on indoor plumb toilets. They had a shared outhouse in the back courtyard of the apartment building. Once she was a bit older, Greta and her neighborhood friend would lay on top of that outhouse to sunbathe under the warm summer sun. The family also rented a very small cottage in the Dalen allotments just a few miles from their apartment, and it was here at the garden allotment that the family was able to grow vegetables and berries for their own table. And if the crop was good, make a little profit at a produce stand too. Urban garden allotments were quite popular during this time and were designed specifically with working-class families like the Gustafssons in mind. Greta and her siblings loved this little luxury as it allowed them an otherwise unavailable green space to roam and play. Greta, as a child, seemed fearless, judging by an account of her creating her own tightrope at the allotment by tying a rope between 2 trees and carefully walking the line, much to the horror of everyone below. Greta Garbo's childhood wasn't quite an existence of pure survival, but they didn't have many luxuries either. It was a simple life, much like many others in working-class Stockholm. Her father was a laborer, having had a few different jobs listed in records, such as gardener and butcher. It was sometimes difficult keeping food on the table for his family of 5, and winters in particular could be long and tense for the family within their tight quarters. Despite these everyday difficulties, there were many who were not as fortunate as the Gustafssons, and they knew that. They really seemed to make the very best of the life they had. Greta had an especially affectionate fondness for her mother, who she described as loving, pleasant, and positive, even when circumstances around her were not so positive. The 3 Gustafsson girls of the house, Mother Anna and daughters Alva and Greta, were very close. World War I, the Great War, broke out in 1914 when Greta was 8 years old. And with it, the already scarce food supply became even more scarce with the wartime food shortages. There were rations on items like bread, sugar, butter, and coffee, and soup kitchens popped up to aid residents of Sweden during the difficult time. Young Greta would sing and perform at the Salvation Army during this time, sharing her special brand of charisma with everyone passing by. During a very difficult time, she provided a little light to everyone around her. She was a unique child. Greta Garbo was born a deep thinker. She lived mostly within the vastness of her own mind. She didn't play much like the other children in her neighborhood, although when she did, she preferred to interact with the boys. Less drama. Mostly, she spent her time reflecting and dreaming. I did most of my playing by thinking, she said. She was a mostly solitary child by choice, and her moods were always changing. Very happy one moment, she recalled of her childhood. The next moment, there was nothing left for me. And then, when she was 6 or 7 years old, Greta found something that shined her soul. The theater. There was a theater and a cabaret across the alleyway from one another, not far from the family's apartment. And little Greta wouldn't situate herself in the audience or under the marquee. She situated herself in the back alleys of them. Any chance she could, she would arrive in time to observe the actors, actresses, and performers arrive as the typical everyday people they were. And then, through the open back door, she would sit outside and listen to them get ready and transform into the fictional characters they were about to share with their audiences. She would sit and listen from the back of the theater as the performances played, and she would never forget the sights, sounds, and smells of those evenings. There is no smell in the world like the smell of the backyard of a theater, Garbo later recalled of the aroma of grease paint. No smell that would mean as much to me, ever. We all have smells that bring us right back to our fond childhood memories. Well, this was it for Greta Garbo. It was the smell that signaled her future. She knew as she sat in the alley behind those theaters that she wanted to be an actress. Greta also frequented her neighborhood Nickelodeon as often as she could. She loved the escape motion pictures could give her. She would take in the latest of what Charlie Chaplin, Mary Pickford, and Douglas Fairbanks had to offer up on the silver screen from the United States, as well as local Swedish films. Her parents didn't have a lot of excess money for their youngest child to splurge on movies all the time, so she would often sweet-talk her way in. She loved the movies, but it was the live performance of a stage that really set her heart on fire. When she was 13 years old, she even created her own theater company, the Attic Theater. She and a few friends would gather anything they could get their hands on within their homes to use as props and costumes, and they would practice their little hearts out before putting on their performances for anyone who would take the time to watch them. Greta Garbo herself described herself as a sometimes mischievous child. She was very inquisitive, but she was also loving and kind. I thought this statement from a school friend summed her up well. Judith Ronell said of Greta in her youth, quote, "She was a strangely appealing girl. She was very careful and attentive at her lessons, but her mind was always on the stage. I remember that when any of the students were scolded, she waited for them in the corridor after class and flung her arms around them. She hated what she thought was injustice." End quote. Greta Garbo did well in school, and she stood out, having reached 5'7" tall by the age of 12. But she did not enjoy school very much. She wanted to be outside of those walls, dreaming of more enchanting things than science and geography. As was typical of working-class family life in Sweden at the time, Greta finished her formal schooling at the age of 13 in the spring of 1919. By the time she finished school, her father Carl was very ill with kidney disease, a condition that there was little to no treatment for then. Anna had to go back to work, and the older two children, Sven and Alva, had entered the workforce as well. As soon as 13-year-old Greta finished her schooling, she was also expected to earn a paycheck. And she did so by not working at one, but 3 separate barbershops as a soap girl. Her paycheck went directly to her mother, and her tip money went directly to chocolate, as it should. Greta's father died on June 1st, 1920, at the young age of 49. The entire family was obviously devastated. Greta was just 14 years old when she lost her father. With her father gone and Greta not needed as much at home to care for him, she left her barbershop work to go work at the beloved Paul U. Bergstrom's department store, affectionately called Pub. And it was while working there that she had her film debut in a promotional film for the store, a 23-minute-long promotional film that was shown in theaters. This was then followed by additional industrial films, some extra work, and a promotional film for the city of Stockholm, which was scheduled to be shown at the Tokyo World's Fair. It was during this time that 15-year-old Greta Garbo had her first romantic relationship. And the man was over twice her age. He was in his early 30s. It doesn't appear anyone blinked their eye at that in early 1920 Stockholm. She met him, Max was his name, on a film set. Max's nephew was playing Greta's younger brother in a movie. Although getting some movie work, Greta still had her heart set on the theater. So she began taking acting lessons at the age of 15. And then at 17, Greta Garbo's dreams were starting to shine true when she was accepted into Stockholm's Dramatic School of the Royal Theatre, or Dramaten, which was among one of the finest acting schools in the entire world. Her first day of school there was on her 17th birthday in September of 1922. The theater was highly regarded in Sweden, and Dramaten did not charge tuition to its students. This was a spectacular opportunity for Greta Garbo and her small class of peers, and she quickly proved herself to be a very talented, naturalistic actress with an unrelenting drive to be the very best she could be. Even so, she was almost always late for school, but when she was there, she gave it her all. The elite group of students accepted into the Dramatic School of the Royal Theatre were instructed on a wide range of things. The day would always begin with exercise, and then they would have lessons in diction, dance, portrayal, history, fencing, movement, and overall stage presence. During their first year, students would appear as extras in plays, and they would work up to greater roles from there. Greta Garbo was an exception. Her talent was so remarkable that she was cast in 3 minor roles during her first year. This was virtually unheard of. To get a little glimpse into what kind of a young woman Greta Garbo was during her time in acting school, let's hear what one of her Dramaten classmates and Greta's best friend, Mimi Polak, recalled of her. Quote, "Greta was the youngest in age in our litter, but still the oldest. Quiet, thoughtful, scared, fearless, curious about life, and very ready to laugh. An absolutely wonderfully composed person." End quote. Greta's time at Dramaten was wonderful and enlightening, and she later said her 2 years there were perhaps the happiest time of her life. It was during her time at Dramaten that Greta Gustafsson began using the name Greta Garbo. Greta Garbo also continued working her way up the ladder in Sweden's film industry as she worked her way through acting school. She made many key connections during her early life in the performing arts, and one of them was to one of Sweden's most influential film directors, Maurits Stiller. Through Stiller, Greta found more prominent film roles, and she also found love. Stiller was trying to cast the supporting role of Elizabeth for his upcoming film, The Saga of Gösta Berling, and he was having a difficult time finding the perfect young woman for the part. And then, on a visit to Dramaten, he found her. Greta Garbo was perfect. Well, almost perfect. Stiller urged her to lose some weight for the project, 20 whopping pounds. Gösta Berling was a successful film and marked the launching point for Greta Garbo's film career as we know it today. Through their work together, Garbo and Stiller became quite smitten with one another, and their relationship shifted to a romantic one. Maurits Stiller was fascinated by Greta Garbo, her talent, her mystique, and her beauty, and she quickly became his muse. And he convinced her to devote herself professionally to only him, to not work for any other directors. Many were shocked by this pairing, especially considering the fact that Greta Garbo was 18 years old, and Marit Stiller was 40 years old. It was an invigorating time for Greta Garbo, and big changes were on the horizon for her. 16 months after the premiere of Gösta Berling, Greta Garbo would be on her way to Hollywood. Here's how it played out, Hollywood getting their hands on Greta Garbo. During her courtship and professional devotion to Marit Stiller, Stiller received a telegram from MGM in November of 1924. They were on the hunt for any and all talented directors and actors from around the world. Well, not everywhere in the world. They, of course, wanted white Europeans. In the telegram, Marit Stiller was asked to meet with MGM head Louis B. Mayer himself, who was in Rome beginning the grueling cleanup of the insanely expensive mess Ben-Hur had become. The meeting was set, and Stiller's partner Greta Garbo would be traveling with him while they met with Louis B. Mayer in Berlin later that month. Louis B. Mayer initially had his eyes set on Marit Stiller, the talented Swedish director. But through his preliminary snooping around, he found that Stiller had a very important woman by his side, his young protégé, and that he likely wasn't going anywhere without her. They were a package deal. Still, Louis B. Mayer was a powerful man, and he was ready and willing to face off any such challenge that came his way. He could convince the Swedish super director that a big, fancy Hollywood directing career was way better than a woman. But then, also as part of his preliminary snooping, Mayer screened Gösta Berling before leaving Hollywood for Europe, and he saw this protégé of Marit Stiller's, this Greta Garbo. And he was instantly enraptured by her. It was her eyes that initially lured him in. Louis B. Mayer's daughter, Irene, future wife of David O. Selznick, was seated next to her father during the screening. And this is what Mayer said to his daughter. "I'll take Stiller, all right. As for the girl, I want her even more than Stiller. I can make a star out of her. I'll take them both." During this meeting in Berlin at the end of November 1924, business was of course conducted mostly between the two men. If Louis B. Mayer did have a great interest in the star power of Greta Garbo, he did not let it show to her at the meeting. But he had interest all right. 2 months later, on January 30th, 1925, both Marit Stiller and Greta Garbo signed official letters of intent for contracted work with MGM in Hollywood. And the salaries offered to each of them were pretty good. Mayer had obviously committed to the idea of making Greta Garbo his newest star because he started her off with a pretty decent rookie feature player salary. He was ready to go all in on this fairly new to filmmaking 19-year-old Swedish girl. Greta Garbo did 2 more films in Europe and then set sail for a new life, new opportunities, and new adventures in the United States of America. The romantic relationship between Greta Garbo and Marit Stiller had begun to unravel in the months leading up to their departure for the United States. But they were still at least friendly enough to take the transatlantic voyage together towards a new life and new opportunities at MGM. The age difference was a huge factor in the ups and downs of their relationship, and Stiller feeling a kind of control over his muse was likely another. This is evident from comments he made like this to a friend. "I have taught her everything. She takes instruction carefully and is like wax in my hands." The problem with this grand voyage to the U.S. into the waiting arms of MGM was Marit Stiller had almost immediately begun second-guessing signing that letter of intent with the studio. Louis B. Mayer was a very convincing and intimidating man. As the energy of the meeting began to die down, Stiller wasn't so sure he wanted to leave Sweden. That was his home. But he took that journey with Greta. He had signed his life away, so he felt he had to. They set sail aboard the SS Drottningholm on June 26, 1925, and arrived in New York City on July 6, 1925, with 0 fanfare. They were greeted by simply one MGM publicist, one photographer, and a translator. The U.S. had no idea the great gift it had just received, and no one was there to see its arrival. Although initially supposed to be in New York for just 2 weeks before traveling on to California, the two were there for 2 months. It took that long to negotiate their contracts in an attempt to secure not only bigger salaries, but for Greta at least, a shorter contract period. The letter of intent stated 5 years, and Garbo realized that was a really long time, especially considering her dear sister Alva had been recently diagnosed with lymphoma. She knew she couldn't stay tied to America for 5 years. Her negotiating power came to play in the fact that she was a minor, which MGM had not realized because she seemed so mature. The legal adult age was 21, and she was only 19 when she signed that letter of intent. It was not legally binding. So she, in the end, was able to negotiate a shorter contract period. Greta Garbo initially reveled in the excitement of being in a new country. Although New York City wasn't exactly what she had painted in her vivid imagination, she loved it. She was said to be effervescent and fun-loving. Contrary to that, however, was something she wrote in a letter to back home during her time in New York. She wrote, quote, "I feel suicidal. I will either drown myself in the bath or jump out of the window. Everything is a mess." End quote. Greta Garbo was a woman of many varying moods, and her moods could change very quickly. It's impossible to say for sure today, but many over time have believed that she suffered from bipolar disorder. The biggest setback to her mental health after her arrival in the States was the language barrier. She immediately began taking English lessons, but it was really difficult for her to get to know New York City without being able to talk to most of the local people easily. MGM publicist Hubert Voigt, the man placed in charge of greeting them in New York, he described Greta Garbo's reaction to the city like this. Quote, "She wanted to see the Woolworth building. She had heard of it and was so impressed when she saw it. She had tears in her eyes over the big buildings." End quote. The next thing Greta Garbo wanted to check off of her New York bucket list was riding a roller coaster at Coney Island. Something Voigt made happen for her, and then watching her take the ride over and over for an hour, giddy and happy as a child. It didn't take long for Greta Garbo's new adopted country to get to know and love their new up-and-coming star, even before she appeared in any American films. Because the still camera loved Greta Garbo. And Greta Garbo knew the power of the camera. Photographers were quickly flooding to her, wanting to take her photo. And although many of these early American portrait photos of Greta Garbo do not survive today, the ones that do are pure and simple art. And Garbo was reportedly so easy and natural to work with. She required little to no instruction. A photographer could simply tell her the vibe he was looking for, and she would move and pose and express herself perfectly to match that vibe. And the end result was stunning and mysterious and sexy and beauty that had never been captured before. No stiff pose placements required, no striving to get the proper facial expression, no frustrated direction from the photographer. Just plain, beautiful, natural art. It was Greta Garbo's gift, one of many gifts. Greta Garbo and Marit Stiller set off for their journey from New York City to Hollywood, California at the end of August 1925. They had the privilege of taking their sweet time doing so because, as a minor, Greta's mother had to sign her contract for MGM, which meant a long boat ride for that paper contract to get to Anna Gustafson's hands. and a long boat ride back to New York. So Greta and Moritz made stops in Chicago, Minneapolis, and went up to Banff, Victoria, and Vancouver in Canada as they made their way to Los Angeles. Their final stop was in San Francisco, where Moritz's two brothers lived. On September 10, 1925, they were welcomed to Los Angeles by a crew of Scandinavians employed by the MGM Dream Factory. There were flowers and speeches and a great celebration. Then they got settled into their new homes, both of them making bungalows at the Miramar Hotel in Santa Monica their first California homes, a place that was largely populated by the Scandinavian community of Hollywood. Greta loved being on the beach. It was the core thing that brought peace and calm to her life as she adjusted to life in Hollywood. She spent her free time in Santa Monica walking the beach, sometimes with Stiller and sometimes alone, riding horses, swimming, reading. She loved to read and had her mother constantly sending her Swedish books. And she loved to speed. As soon as Greta Garbo could afford a car, she bought one, learned how to drive, and allegedly had quite a heavy foot, landing herself a few speeding tickets in her first year in California. MGM got right to work with Greta Garbo. First, her looks. That's what was most important to MGM, you know. The studio reportedly had a little spot removed from Greta's hairline and had her teeth capped or aligned. They also changed her hair. Oh, and ordered her to remain as thin as possible at all times. All in all, Greta Garbo got off pretty easy in the MGM transformation department. Her first film for the studio was Torrent, which was a pretty big production for MGM, and a bit risky to put their newly contracted foreign actress in the lead role. Before the film could even be released, Greta Garbo had become the talk of the town. The rest of the nation didn't know it yet, but everyone in Hollywood knew that this new Swedish actress Louis B. Mayer had lured into town was something very special. Something nobody had ever seen before. The production of Torrent was difficult for Greta Garbo. First, she did not get along well with her co-star, Ricardo Cortez. Second, the language barrier again. Greta felt completely out of the loop and very alone much of the time. And luckily, a translator was finally brought in for her. And then, she also had to learn a whole new way of filmmaking. American filmmaking was much different than what she had known in Sweden. Torrent was a grueling production for her to endure. Greta wrote to her best friend Mimi back in Sweden that she got up at 6 a.m. every day, arrived at the studio by 9, back to her bungalow around 7, and then straight to bed before doing it all over again the next day. Torrent did well in theaters. MGM made sure of that through their publicity decisions. But the main success of the film, the one thing everybody who went to see it was talking about, was MGM's new star, Greta Garbo. Greta Garbo was an overnight star. Reviews of her said things like, her technique is so perfect as to be imperceptible, and her mobile features express the most subtle shades of emotion. Few native actresses are so gifted. And she is not so much an actress as she is endowed with individuality and magnetisms. And Miss Garbo may lift her head the fraction of an inch, and it means more than John Gilbert's artificial smile or wide-eyed expression. Miss Garbo may not be wholly unaware of her personal charm, but she never for an instant gives one the idea that she is thinking of how she looks before the camera. Now, Greta Garbo didn't have to worry too much about her lacking skills in speaking the English language as far as staying in the movies. It was only 1926. The talkie revolution hadn't quite kicked off yet. So, although she wasn't required to speak in films, Garbo knew she had to polish up her English since she was going to be in Hollywood for at least 3 years. It was a lonely existence, not being able to communicate well with everyone around her. She also wanted to learn everything she could about American filmmaking. She wanted to see how it was done, but she did not want to take examples of the craft of acting from anyone else. She was a unique individual with a unique way of bringing her characters to life, and she didn't need to take inspiration from anyone. To accomplish both of these desires, to learn English and to learn American filmmaking, she spent time on other sets during breaks of filming of Torrent, and she talked to technicians on the sets as she practiced dialing in her new language. And then her next movie paired her up with her on-again, off-again romantic partner, the man she'd embarked on this grand adventure with, Moritz Stiller, who would be directing her in The Temptress. But he was kicked off the project and let go from MGM altogether about 2/3 of the way into filming. He was having a difficult time confining his art of directing within MGM's strict guidelines. Major creative differences. MGM's loss and Paramount's win. Stiller scooted on over to Paramount to direct Pola Negri in Hotel Imperial, and then he headed back to Sweden. Hollywood was not for him. He and Greta had what would fall into the complicated description of a relationship. Although their once heated romance back in Sweden had fizzled out, they still cared deeply for each other and had an on-again, off-again romantic relationship. The biggest obstacle for them, again, like Garbo's first romance, was how much older Stiller was than her. I am all for loving who you love, but there is simply always going to be struggles that exist in relationships with a huge age gap like that wouldn't exist otherwise. She was barely a legal adult by the time he returned to Sweden, and they had already by that time been together, on and off, for about 4 years. She was just a girl when they first met, while he had already been an adult for 20 years. When Stiller left the U.S., Greta had felt complicated feelings about the relationship for some time, but the fact remained that he was her closest confidant and one of the only people she could easily speak to in her native language. When he left Hollywood to return to Sweden, it left Greta Garbo very sad and very lonely. To add to her broken heart, her sister Alva tragically lost her battle with lymphoma in April of 1926 during Greta's filming of The Temptress. Alva was just 22 years old, and she and Greta had been very close their entire lives. Greta had never yearned for her homeland as much as she did during that time. Greta Garbo pleaded with Louis B. Mayer to give her a little time off after filming completed on The Temptress. She was really struggling in her new town, still learning the ropes and her new language, and now she was left to grieve the loss of her sister without her family by her side. Mayer was in the game to make money, though, not to mend broken hearts, and he needed his new magical star to make him some money. Greta was thrown right into her next movie, Flesh and the Devil. She hadn't wanted to start a new project immediately after The Temptress and losing both her sister and her longtime partner, but she was left with little choice. MGM owned her. But, as it turned out, working on this movie would provide her with exactly what she needed to heal her emotional wounds. It came in the form of her leading man, actor John Gilbert. When Greta Garbo and John Gilbert were formally introduced just before filming was to begin for Flesh and the Devil, Greta's translator, Sven-Hugo Borg, witnessed an immediate chemistry. Really strong chemistry. Some instant spark, Borg recalled. Some flash seemed to pass between them the instant they looked into each other's eyes. If there was ever a case of love at first sight, that was it. I knew then that Stiller's influence was put aside forever. I felt sorry for him. When Greta Garbo and John Gilbert filmed their first love scene, it was clear what was happening. They got lost in one another and in their world. To them, no one else was around. They weren't acting. They were falling for each other. Everyone involved in the production of Flesh and the Devil could see it. Go and watch it if you haven't. When you see that first dance and first romantic interaction between Greta Garbo and John Gilbert, it is clear there is a whole lot more than just acting at play there. You can almost feel the electricity through the screen 100 years later. This was something spectacular. This was something magical. And with this, we will rest Greta Garbo's story for this week. When we meet again, I will tell you all about how Greta Garbo and John Gilbert's stories came together. And I will tell you about the rest of her life. Thanks for hanging in there with me, guys. Before we go, I want to take a minute to thank those of you who reached out when a recent wildfire swept through my area. For those of you who don't know, we came very close to losing our home, and we have many neighbors who did lose their homes and everything they own. It was a very traumatic incident. I fled our home with my dogs, my laptop, mostly just so I could save all my podcast files, and the clothes on my back. That's all I had time for. And I had to drive through fire on both sides of the road to get to safety. It was pretty traumatic. And then we were displaced for 5 days, much of that time not knowing if we still had a house or not. My amazing mom took us and our neighbor in, plus our 3 dogs and our neighbor's brand new puppy, who she just brought home 30 minutes before we had to flee. So we are so very thankful for her generosity in letting us bombard her life for 5 days. You guys, the fire spread really, really fast, terrifyingly fast. It was a scary time. But crews were able to stop the spread right on our driveway, actually. I can almost see the edge of the fire from where I'm sitting right now. And they stopped it by dropping a huge line of pink fire retardant from the sky and bulldozing a wide fire line through the woods here. My preschool kids actually loved that hot pink in all the trees from the fire retardant. To them, it was cool. To me, not so much. But it stopped the fire, and I'm so happy for that. So we still, as I recount this, have crews from the DNR and Forest Service walking our woods every single day watching for hotspots, and pretty regular air traffic in the sky looking from above. Actually, this morning I had to put off recording about 5 hours waiting for a helicopter that was just going back and forth right over our yard. But that's where the fire line is, so I gladly waited. They were just watching for hotspots. We are so thankful that these crews are doing such amazing post-fire work because we have had a couple of hotspots flare up in our woods. And it has been so dry and windy that without immediate attention, because they were here, it easily could have started another forest fire. It's just been a really surreal experience, and I have found myself having a really hard time recovering mentally and emotionally from it, which has been kind of confusing for me because I'm usually pretty tough. So anyway, it's just been a really tough time, and my plate is crazily overflowing right now, and I lost a lot of work time. I have a lot of work stuff and other obligations going on right now. So it was really hard to get this episode out, but I'm happy I did. My mind is just not functioning very well right now, and I lost a lot of valuable work time during the fire. It's been really hard to focus, but I am getting through it. So anyways, that's what's been going on. I've been a little down in the dumps a bit, but I am making sure to focus on the positive and be grateful that our home wasn't destroyed and that no lives were lost in the fire. Life is good, just a little hard right now. And this brings me to some recent reviews that definitely did not help my emotional state. Back to that AI stuff I was talking about earlier, I'm not letting that go. Are you ready for one of my famous Aaron rants? It's been a while, hasn't it? Normally, I would ignore reviews like these, but they just upset me so much that I'm going to share them with you. First, from Tone Penley on Spotify, who said, I was so excited to find this podcast, then disappointed to realize it was just more AI slop. And from Len on Spotify, who said, I thought the voice was AI. The phrasing is off. So on that one, I do want to point out that his comment was made on one of my hot off the press episodes, where I literally read content from old movie magazines like Photoplay. The manner of speech was very much different in 1930, which was the year that I was reading from in the episode that he commented on. So the reason it may sound off is because it is something someone wrote almost a century ago. And as for the other comment, the AI slop comment, that one really hurt because I put a lot of time and energy into creating these episodes. And the fact that I am being accused of doing anything AI just seems cruel. Because I am very against AI. I cannot stand it, and I think it's very dangerous. I am very against it, especially for anything regarding this podcast. Like I said, I read good old-fashioned books to research my stories, the best biographies out there. I type what I learn from those books with my real fingers on my real laptop. I sit my real body down in my real chair and talk into a real microphone. And then I spend hours editing what my real voice spoke into that microphone. I sacrifice an incredible amount of my free time to create these shows. I devote most of my weekend time to it. That's why I had to drop down to bi-weekly. I work hard, and absolutely none of it is aided along by AI, nor will it ever be. There are AI tools out there that many podcasters use for editing, but I am not satisfied with the end result of taking these shortcuts. So I go through the long and grueling task of editing my recordings minute by minute. A lot of podcasters use AI for research and writing, and even AI speech, which is what I was accused of. Not for me. Not ever. It is a lot of work to create this slop, because it is important to me that I put out the best quality slop I can. It just makes me really sad that this is the world we live in now, that a human has to defend the work of their human mind. I think it is very dangerous. It's just really sad and frustrating. And I think now, more than ever, is the time to get out and support your favorite independent creators, because we are apparently being taken over by AI. Get out and support them before we're all shoved out of the game. Keep the human mind and voice alive. Another comment that bummed me out used big fancy words like turgid and soporific, and complained about the fact that I didn't talk much about the actor's film career, which is kind of what this podcast is, and I think I make that very clear in my intro. That person did not like this show at all, and ended by saying it was soapy and very dull. Again, I work my butt off for basically free to share these stories, and there are millions of other podcasts out there if you don't like this one. But all that hard work, and it just kind of stings to be drugged down so hard, especially when I'm already down to start with. I think that's the reason this all bothers me so much, is because I was already down in the dumps. But I have so many of you that share your love and positive feedback all the time, and I thank you so much for that. Please keep the love coming. The only reason I share these ones with you is to give another gentle reminder to just be kind. Don't accuse someone of being a robot, and just remember, independent creators like me are doing this in their spare time. We pretty much all have full-time jobs outside of our shows, and we are doing the very best we can for little or no pay. I don't have a production team, it's just me. I love doing this, but I'll be honest, it's sometimes hard to go on sacrificing my personal life when I get feedback like this. To have something you worked hard on and are proud of called slop. It was just a kick while I was already down. But the slop must go on. So, one last thing, and I promise I'll stop yapping to you. As an anniversary gift, I ask of one teensy tiny little gift from you all. Please tell 1 or 2 people about this podcast. Let's grow our community. I'll even make it easy for you and create a post on Instagram and Facebook that you can easily share with all your friends and family. So if you know someone in your life that loves dull, robotic slop, send them my way. I would love to bore them to tears with my robot voice and my boring stories. And this is a good place to end with the way I end all of my shows. Reach for the positive in every day, be kind to everyone you encounter, and have a great rest of your week. Thanks, guys. I will be back with the rest of Greta Garbo's story. For this episode, I used 2 fantastic biographies of the life of Greta Garbo. Greta Garbo and the Rise of the Modern Woman by Scott Reisfield, and Greta Garbo, A Life Apart by Swenson, and IMDB.
Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.